The dog dude found another specialist, aka Chrollo Lucifer. He will find out about Haoli and what they did in Meteor City. All of the plots are converging. So not only that, but Mr. Dogman was also extremely excited about spotting Chrollo. It was like running into a celebrity. And Dogman clearly has some sort of martial arts background, or is at least a martial arts enthusiast. He's probably a bit of a Heaven's Arena nut, which is potentially a troubling thing, because Dogman probably wasn't a Nen user when the Chrollo vs. Hisoka fight was broadcast. But if he was to review footage of it, then he'd theoretically be able to see the Nen abilities being used in that match, like how Gon and Killua analyzed the video of Hisoka's fight. So Dogman could end up being a surprisingly troubling opponent for either Chrollo or Hisoka or both. They're both floor masters, so they have a lot of fights recorded in Heaven's Arena for him to potentially study if he doesn't know them off by heart already. But what we have to ascertain here is Dogman's purpose within the Haoli family. Morena says that what binds her family together is the common goal of killing people. And Morena will support the goals of her children as a proud parent as best as possible. So in the case of Dogman, his take on all of this killing business may be the desire to fight and kill as many powerful martial artists as possible, and spotting Chrollo is giving him a bit of a red rocket because he's putting Chrollo on his hit list for later. And if Dogman was to stumble across Hisoka, then you'd need to think that there would be a similar reaction, because Hisoka, also a floor master and quite well known in the world of televised fight battling, and I do think that the idea of Dogman being an actual problem has been pretty laughable up until now, because now he is a level 62 and we are getting to the point where his raw power, his raw aura is overwhelming enough to overcome the experience gap. We're very much reaching that ramp up point that the Chimera Ants got to when they became a serious threat. And with Dogman, I've also been wondering about him thematically. I imagine that all of the dog stuff is his flamboyant stage combat persona, but in terms of Nen, I wouldn't be surprised if a key restriction for his ability was that Dogman had to wear the dog mask to be able to use his sniffing powers. And here's the thing about Dogman, he's only level 62, which previously I said was big, and it is the highest known Haoli member, but that still leaves 38 more levels of development open to further boost his aura and hone that sniffing ability. So right now, Dogman can detect a person's Nen affinity as well as whether or not they've awakened their aura, but could the next step in his canine evolution be to outright sniff someone's Nen ability and have a rough idea of what they can do? Because if so, Dogman would become a pretty unstoppable presence in the world of Nen, which is more often than not a battle of knowledge and discovery. The first person to figure out roughly how the ability of the other functions is almost always at a massive advantage. And it's not just Dogman either, each and every single other member of the Haoli family would achieve a similarly overpowered existence upon maxing out. And just imagine 20 of these level 100 guys running around. If that happens, they are going to make the Phantom Troop look like the underdogs. I'm actually sick of specialists. It's supposed to be a rare ability, but every other Nen user is one, and it seems they don't even use it to its full potential. So I actually think that Hunter x Hunter has handled the idea of the super rare genetic ability quite well compared to the most manga. Even One Piece, which I love dearly, has the idea of Conqueror's Haki, which is supposed to be extremely rare, but pretty much everyone fighting at a top level needs it as a baseline just to compete. So it's lost that feeling of rarity. And maybe I've just come to terms with Togashi's writing style, but I do like that characters can have these super rare genetic powers and not make perfect use of them, because that suits the more realistic atmosphere of Hunter x Hunter. I will say that it's very rare that this happens though. In fact, most specialists completely blow our puny mind brains and borderline break the world of Nen, like Kurapika, like Chrollo, like Neferpito, and now like Morena. And on that note, Sarainik is also worth mentioning. He's currently training to be one of, if not the most broken specialist we've ever seen. So you definitely can't say that those characters haven't used specialization to its full potential or close to. And we have those 5, which is almost half of all canon specialists that we know of. Now, with that said, one of the more intriguing parts of chapter 408 was that Morena stated that Dogman had already encountered multiple awakened specialists. Not dormant specialists, awakened specialists. So there are a whole host of Nen trained specialists aboard the Black Whale 1 that we haven't even encountered yet. Diddy parties in Hunter x Hunter was not on my 2024 bingo card. I mean, yeah, really the only thing that was missing with these carnivals was the baby oil. But one of the most sobering things about this is that, yeah, a lot of people are quick to equate these carnivals with current real world events, but Togashi has had this plot written for several years now. He's had plot outlines for everything up to at least chapter 430 good to go, and what we're doing right now is just the process of physically bringing all of that to life. But Togashi has been aware of and exploring ideas like this ever since Yu Yu Hakusho. A lot of people have been comparing Morena to Mukuro, which, fair, but also with stuff like the chapter Black Tape, which is a recording of all of humanity's cruelty. And that videotape theme has crossed over into Hunter x Hunter with the Sarasa murder tape in particular, which broke the Phantom Troop. And just to take a quick but very relevant detour, in the previous video I said that Morena is like a demonic presence conjured by the evils of the Kakin Empire. And I would actually make the same argument for Chrollo and the Phantom Troop, because there is at least one confirmed Heoli member who was involved in Sarasa's kidnapping and murder, that being Saratnik's tattoo artist who left the family before Morena came into power. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind, because all of the major plot threads in this arc are pointing to the Kakin Empire as one of the major root causes of human evil in this world, because it's their actions that have created beings like Morena, Chrollo, and even arguably Kurapika, because if the Phantom Troop were never scarred by the Sarasa event, then the Kurta massacre wouldn't have happened. And it's not like the Kakin Empire is the sole force of evil on the planet. If this is indeed a planet, because I still don't think we know that for a fact, but the Kakin Empire has been identified as a point of origin for many of our major characters. And so now what we have is a great reckoning for the Empire, where they are going to have to answer for these assorted crimes. And the jury of their peers who are judging them are the demons they've created. As the royal family have rather arrogantly isolated themselves aboard the Black Whale 1, and their fates again are now more or less in the hands of the specters of revenge that they've conjured through their actions. But to bring this all the way back around to the original comment, the Diddy parties and such, what I wanted to say is that Togashi is really tapped into what goes on in reality. He makes an effort to explore that real darkness, and it affects both him and the series on a very core level, which is why he uses these real-world events as motivation for his fictional characters. And to explore this, I'll come back to this Morena panel with her collage of the world, and I can't show any of these images on YouTube because it'll get age restricted for sure, but more than half of these images that you see here are real. They are Togashi drawing photos of historical atrocities. So for example, these starving children on the right-hand corner, they are not fictional. These are real kids that Togashi has drawn into Hunter x Hunter. And it just gets worse and worse the more you look into the origins of every image in this collage. Some of them are extremely disturbing moments of human evil caught on camera. And I do think that Morena and the Heoli family are a manifestation of Togashi's desire to combat these evils in his own way. A bit of a power fantasy of imagining, well, you know what if I could burn it all down? And I often refer to Morena as an antagonist in this arc. Sometimes I even claim that she may be the antagonist of the Succession Contest arc. But that's probably an incorrect use of that word. Because from the author's perspective, I think that Morena is every bit as much of a protagonist as Kurapika or Chrollo. And I do think that deep down, Togashi wants to see the Heoli family succeed. And before we move away from this topic, someone in the comments pointed out something very relevant, which is that Morena described destroying the Kakin Empire as a, quote, small goal. And that was then equated to the existence of the dealer card, which allows Borkson to retrieve a card from the graveyard. However, in order to do so, she first needs to complete a, quote, small request from Morena. And knowing what Morena considers to be a small goal, this is probably not going to be a small request from Borkson's perspective. Although speaking of perspective, I just wanted to give a shout out to Nobunaga for being even more right than he realized in chapter 405. This was when he questioned whether or not the real Heoli family were even aboard the ship, and not only is the family not real, but it's not even the real Morena. So good on him. Suddenly, the Kakin King Nen Beast makes a lot of sense. Yes, Nasubi's guardian spirit beast has always been one of the ones that's weirded me out the most. Just because it is a grotesque combination of female sex organs haphazardly thrown together, which really puts the idea of meat and flesh on the narrative table, because Nasubi's just concerned with body parts. It's his ever-consuming paramount goal in life. And something that I did neglect to mention in the previous video is that these Kakin carnivals are almost certainly a Nasubi-era event. In this chapter, Morena says that there have been 7 batches of carnival children, so I do think that this event was probably instituted by Nasubi, because each new king of the Kakin Empire has the ability to take the empire in a brand new direction. That's why Hulkenberg, for example, is still seen and supported by Nasubi as a valid candidate, because if Hulkenberg wants to end the monarchy, then that is his right so long as he wins the contest. So I do think that these carnivals are almost certainly a Nasubi era exclusive inclusive. And if we did want to point to a root evil for people like Morena, Chrollo, and Karapika, he's probably the person single most responsible. But if you think about other princes like Cyrenic, who is always my first go-to example for everything, then he would surely despise these carnivals because he seems to have no real interest in the carnal pleasures of life. To him, women are purely materials for art, and even then he refuses to use the common and unsophisticated ones, which he refers to as skinning pigs. So if Cyrenic was to win this contest, then good news, because I imagine that these festivals would stop. But also bad news, because they'd probably be replaced with something much more horrifying, if indeed you can even imagine that. And just in regards to the orphan batches, there is a slightly confusing thing happening here, which I have to assume is an error on Togashi's part, where he says that the latest batch of carnival orphans were the class of 20, as in 2020. This conflicts with the actual Hunter x Hunter timeline, because in that world it's currently 2001, and this isn't a translation issue, this is how it's said in the original Japanese as well. And I suppose that this could be a mistake on Togashi's part. He may have meant to write 00 as in 2000 instead of 20, because Morena did say that the latest batch of orphans were born last year, so that would make sense. Now 2001, they were born in 2000. But the other possibility is that the Kakin Empire uses a different calendar system to the rest of the world. It's a more roundabout possibility to potentially cover up this error, but it's possible. Saying that when they reach a level 100, they'll go off and start their own families, it's very similar to the Chimera Ant arc, where they said that every queen will have a king and then move on to another colony, creating another king, and so on and so forth. It is quite similar to what happened with the Chimera Ants, except what happened with the ants went a bit wrong, because Meruem killed the queen and kind of abandoned his own colony, and then after Meruem broke the colony hierarchy, a lot of the squadron leaders set out to become kings of their own colonies to varying degrees of mediocre success. But what the leaders were missing was an actual natural mechanism to propagate those colonies. What we had were a series of kings with no queens. And with no queens, there was only so much that these wannabe kings could do. The most successful squadron leader was probably Zazan, because at least she had an ability that could convert humans into subservient creatures, but that really is just the world domination we have at home. The ants weren't meant to be broken up like that. Their natural process was interrupted, and the fracture of the colony made them weaker. Whereas the Haoli family, their natural process is designed to be broken up from the get-go, but only once each of their members is powerful enough to stand on their own. So it's a very human take on the Chimera Ants. You know, we're going to be nurturing this lovely family until you're grown up and able to live in the world on your own. Love that there is a panel on page 3 in which Morena is drawn in Sailor Moon style. Then it goes back to normal like nothing happened. You know, it's funny that you bring that up, because the author of Sailor Moon is Naoko Takeuchi, and she's married to Yoshihiro Togashi. And they're an interesting couple, as demonstrated by that one time when Naoko drew both of their author avatars and she's asking for permission to stare at Togashi's foreskin, which he grants her. But from time to time, she actually does help out with Hunter x Hunter. And every now and then I do see a call for Naoko Takeuchi to be the person to finish Hunter x Hunter. A proper husband and wife team up, he writes, she draws. But then again, I imagine that she has a lot of her own stuff going on as well, because Sailor Moon is far from dead. But all of which is to say that if Morena was drawn in the Sailor Moon style, then there is every chance that this actually was Naoko Takeuchi coming in for a cameo panel, or that Togashi was drawing it in this way purposely as an ode to his wife. Either way, it's one very sweet little moment in an arc, otherwise packed full of darkness and depravity.